Once upon a time, the world was ruled by kings. Across the European continent, power flowed downward, from crowns, from thrones, from bloodlines that claimed authority not by consent, but by inheritance. Land did not belong to the people who lived on it. It belonged to the king. And the people who worked it were not citizens, they were subjects. Kings decided who owned land. Kings decided who could keep it. Kings decided when it could be taken. Families lived their entire lives under the weight of that authority. They paid tribute. They bowed. They obeyed. And when the king needed more land, more labor, more wealth, it was not asked for, it was taken. And so people began to leave. They did not leave because life was easy somewhere else. They left because life under kings was unbearable. They left because they wanted something that did not exist where they were born: independence. Not comfort, not riches. Independence. They boarded wooden ships and crossed a violent ocean. Men, women, and children packed into darkness, disease, and hunger. Many never made it. They were buried at sea without names, without markers, without ceremony. Lost between the world they fled and the world they hoped for. But they came anyway, because hope was stronger than fear. When they reached this new land, they did not find paradise. They found wilderness. They found hardship. They found danger. But they also found something they had never known before: the chance to live without a king. That freedom was not given. It was fought for. Blood was spilled on battlefields so that authority would no longer flow from a throne, but from the people themselves. The Revolutionary War was not fought over convenience. It was fought over consent. It was a declaration that no ruler, foreign or domestic, had the right to govern without permission. From that bloodshed, a nation was born. A republic. A government not meant to rule the people, but to serve them. A government restrained by law. A government bound by the recognition that rights do not come from rulers. They are inalienable, and they come from God. Among those rights were life, liberty, and property. Property was not an afterthought, it was a foundation, because a man who owns nothing is dependent, and a people who own nothing are easily ruled. So the people moved west. They loaded their lives into wagons and crossed vast distances, through forests, plains, deserts, and mountains. They endured unbearable winters and scorching summers. They faced starvation, disease, and death. And when they reached land no king had claimed, they drove a stake into the ground and said, "This is mine." They cleared it by hand. They built homes from nothing. They dug wells, shovel by shovel, to reach water deep beneath the earth. They planted crops. They raised families. They buried loved ones in that soil. That land was not just dirt. It was survival. It was dignity. It was independence. It was legacy. They were willing to fight and die for it, because land ownership meant no king could starve them into obedience. No ruler could evict them at will. No authority could command their future without consequence. This is how America was built. Generation after generation defended those principles. In wars foreign and domestic, in moments of crisis, in times of sacrifice, always with the understanding that property rights were the shield against tyranny. And now we must pause and mark time. In 2026, this nation reaches 250 years of independence. 2.5 centuries since people chose death over living as subjects. 2.5 centuries since land ownership became the line kings could not cross. 2.5 centuries since independence meant something real, not a slogan, not a celebration, but ownership. Independence was never just freedom of speech or freedom of worship. Independence was the knowledge that no king could take your land. But over time, something changed. Power began to concentrate again. Government grew larger. Authority moved farther away from the people. Decisions affecting families and land were made in distant rooms by people untouched by the consequences. Property was slowly redefined. No longer sacred. No longer absolute. No longer something to be defended. Industry grew powerful. Systems grew complex. And the people were told to trust that it was all for the greater good. Near the end of his life, a former general and a president, Dwight D. Eisenhower, warned the nation that a dangerous alignment was forming, that government and industry could merge into something that no longer served the people. That concentrated power, once unleashed, would be difficult to restrain. That warning was not partisan. It was prophetic, because such systems do not take freedom overnight. They take it gradually, quietly, legally. They take it when people are distracted. They take it when people are comfortable. They take it when people believe someone else will stop it. And most of all, they take it when good people do nothing. Today, we are watching that warning become reality. When land can be taken from families and handed to private industry without consent, that is not the action of a republic. That is the action of a king. When government protects corporations instead of citizens, authority has inverted. When the people are expected to comply instead of consent, they are no longer citizens. Subjects live under permission. Citizens live under rights. Kings take land. Republics protect it. And here is the truth we must confront, plainly and without comfort. The people who came before us were born subjects. They shed blood, sweat, and tears to gain independence. Through that sacrifice, they became free citizens of a free nation. And we, who inherited that citizenship without paying its cost, now face a moment of reckoning. Will we sit back in comfort and surrender what was bought in blood? Will we trade independence for convenience? Will we allow our silence to undo their sacrifice? Because if we do, the result is not theoretical. If we surrender citizenship, we do not just lose something for ourselves. We leave our children something worse. We leave them as subjects once again. And so the question before us is not symbolic. It is not historical. It is present and personal. After 250 years of independence, are we reverting from citizens back into subjects? Have we drifted so far from our founding that we now accept what our ancestors fled? Have we become so comfortable, so complacent, so silent that we allow the return of kings without crowns, because they no longer announce themselves? 100 years ago, if you tried to take a man's land, you would have risked your life, because land was understood to be freedom itself. This nation was not built by people who waited for someone else to fight their battles. It was built by men and women who stood, who sacrificed, and who refused to surrender their land, their liberty, or their future. The question now is unavoidable. Do we still have what it takes to defend the independence that was paid for in blood? Or will history record that freedom was not taken from us by force, but surrendered through silence?
President Donald J. Trump. As our nation prepares to commemorate 250 years of independence, we respectfully ask that you examine the expanding use of eminent domain for carbon capture and sequestration projects across America. For 2.5 centuries, private property has stood as a cornerstone of American liberty. The land we own and the resources beneath it represent freedom, security, and self-determination for millions of families. We appreciate your commitment to strengthening this country and putting America first. As we approach this historic anniversary, we hope that under your leadership, the Constitution's protections of private property remain clear, strong, and unwavering for generations to come. Save My Louisiana is a grassroots organization formed by conservative Louisiana citizens who believe the constitutional protections won 250 years ago are not relics of history, but living safeguards that must be defended. We refuse to stand silent while private property rights are weakened, because we believe the Constitution is not symbolic, it is binding. And we believe, Mr. President, that these are principles you have long defended. Mr. President, we pray that God continues to grant you wisdom in leadership. May this 250th year of independence renew our nation's commitment to liberty, law, and the rights of the people. God bless America.
This film was produced by Save My Louisiana, a conservative grassroots landowner and property rights organization founded by Michael D. Slocum and Robert G. Maddox IV. It was inspired by a growing national effort in which private industry is being granted the power of eminent domain for carbon capture and sequestration projects, not for roads or public utilities, but for private gain. Across the United States, state governments, through legislation enacted by state lawmakers and approved by governors after being granted federal primacy, have authorized this power, transferring it from the people to private industry. We believe this represents a direct violation of the Constitution, which does not permit the taking of private property for private use without a true public good, and marks a fundamental break from the principles of consent, property rights, and limited government. If you believe property rights matter, don't stay silent. Learn what's happening in your state. Share this film. Join the fight to stop eminent domain for private gain and the permanent injection of CO2 beneath our land, our water, and our families. Visit SaveMyLouisiana.org to take action and support the work.